Y2K is the latest A24 film, this one coming from Kyle Mooney. This one is a bit of a disaster sci-fi comedy taking place in the year 1999 on the verge of the year 2000, New Year's Eve. Jaden Martell and Julian Dennison are these two friends who are looking to have a good time, looking to hook up with some hot women. And in the case of Jaden Martell, tell the girl of his dreams that he loves her. Hopefully there's a connection there. Unfortunately, this is a bit of a what-if scenario. Y2K was something in 1999 that people were afraid of, they talked about, but then nothing happened when New Year's hit. This movie asked the question, what if something happened? And so these electronics start coming to life, this AI intelligence connects them all, and now, Julian Dennison, Jaden Martell, and everyone else they've assembled at the party, Laura, played by Rachel Zegler, they are now in a fight against these things, hoping to survive in their small town. I went into this movie pretty excited because it's, A24 and Kyle Mooney. Kyle Mooney did not direct, but he wrote and starred in Brigsby Bear from 2017, which I loved when that came out, and I still love it to this day. It's just a really unique, creative, bit of an oddball movie, but it has like a very sincere, very genuine, emotional hook to it that I really, really enjoyed. So him doing another movie in general, I'm obviously all for, but specifically with this premise, it seemed right up my alley. Small group of kids trying to survive, fighting against something that's larger than life, larger than anything they'd ever expected. That's my shit. That's what I'm all about. This seemed like it could be something completely up my alley. I wanted to see what Kyle Mooney could do with this material. So that's already one of my positives off the bat, is that this is like a very original idea, and I really did like a lot of the narrative potential that they were setting up. Some of the things they do carry through on. I like the horror / action / comedy sequences that they put the characters in these scenarios. I thought a lot of them were handled very well and very fun. There are a lot of fun jokes in this. It does have some really good laugh out loud moments. Some parts in particular that had me laughing way harder than I was expecting to, that I really thoroughly enjoyed and thought that the actors involved really committed to and did a good job with. The actors, yeah, no one gives a bad performance in this. Everyone is on a really great wavelength with each other, emotionally, and they can pull off some good jokes with each other as well. It has a great soundtrack, but also the musical score, I thought they did a really great job with that. And also just shout out to just going with the practical tech suits that they have, where the machines kind of join up into a larger guy. And it's just a real guy in a suit, obviously, but I love seeing that. I love seeing just a practical effect like that, just walking around and being threatening and being the main point of an action scene. I fucking love that so much. So a lot of this was really driving up the right alley for me. Unfortunately, it does get to a point where it has a very limited budget, at least that's what I was thinking when I went in, and there are definitely some points where you can feel that, where just certain ways they block a scene or set it up just feel like they're working with what they have, and it doesn't feel as expansive as it should. It just feels like we're kind of tied down to this one spot and then we can't go anywhere else, and sometimes that could be a little bit distracting. I said a little while ago it is on a smaller budget, but according to Wikipedia it is 15 million. And look, I don't know what went into what, maybe the practical effects that I love so much, maybe that took up most of it and they had to work with what they had for the rest. I don't know how budgeting works. I try not to be too presumptive of what goes into it specifically, because I don't know. But that being said, 15 million is definitely more than 10 or 5, which is the standard for a Blumhouse production. And I'm not saying this feels exactly like a Blumhouse production. It's just a couple shades above it, though. So that kind of started to take me out of the movie a bit. There's also a couple parts with Kyle Mooney's direction. And look, as far as a debut, this is not bad at all. He could definitely go some great places behind the camera. Like I mentioned before, with a lot of the good qualities, it, takes a good director to be back there to do that. I do think there are a couple parts that do show, as far as him being a director, first-time director, there might still be some work that needs to be done there, only because certain lines of dialogue that are supposed to be funny, that are supposed to be these comedic zingers, sometimes get lost because of just the way they've set up the camera, the way they've directed the actors to just keep going, and there are certain parts where someone will say something and I have to think wait, was that supposed to be a joke? They're kind of moving on kind of quickly. There's no, sometimes, when you're making a film, or in this case, a comedy, the way you can, do an abrupt cut to someone and just, really emphasize something that they're saying, that can even add to the humor. And it just feels like there are plenty of points where they didn't really take the opportunity to make, some decent, ideas for jokes or already funny jokes and make them funnier. It felt like this could have been a funnier movie, and certain jokes were getting lost. And I didn't see this with, like, a huge crowd, like a handful of people. But I feel like, you get laughs from, like, the bigger, more obvious jokes, but there are some little things where I was like, it feels like it's just going by pretty quickly, and these should be, like, funny parts. And I'm not sure how I'm going to, like, avoid talking about this without spoiling, so I'm going to try my best to navigate it. There are some deaths that happen, and it kind of feels like the way they went about that was, all right, kill off the funniest, best comedic presence first, and then the second best, and then the third best, and then we're in the third act, so this one doesn't matter. That's kind of the vibe of how they set it up. So when they kill off some of these people early on, there is kind of a sense that we are left with just the leftover characters, and I hate to say that because, once again, I do not hate any of these actors. They, do good work in other things, and they're good in this as far as, like, what emotionally they have to bring to it. And there's no points where I'm, like, watching this and I'm like, why are you even an actor? I think this solely is just, like, a problem I have with, like, the direction of the thing. You kill off characters who, in my opinion, I found to be, like, the funniest, they have the best comedic stage presence, and then you're left with these characters that are a bit underdeveloped already. You have your Jada Martell, obviously, and Rachel Zegler, they have, their thing going on. But as far as some of the other characters you're with, you're like, I don't know you. Like, I really don't. And there are points where it seems like they're trying to have, like, these, like, sincere kind of, like, sitting on the swings next to each other, kind of like, like very low-key kind of, like, emotional talk. And I just couldn't feel anything because it felt like they were trying to, like, build up, like, character moments, but I was like, I don't know why I should care about these characters. Like, the actors I like in other things, but I can't care for a character just because they're played by an actor I enjoy. There's got to be a little bit more meat there, and I don't think they built up a lot of great, strong characterization with them, especially a point where some of them view themselves as the outcasts, and then you have Rachel Zegler's Laura, who's, like, the popular girl, and there's a bit of a divide there as far as, like, I never asked to be popular. In fact, it puts a target on your back, and the outcasts are like, man, you just don't get us, and blah, blah, blah. And that felt like something that came out of nowhere as far as, like, any, like, riffs or tension between the characters. I was like, was this a thing that they were trying to establish earlier? I must have missed that. I know popularity is a thing that's often discussed when it comes to, like, school and high school movies, whatever, but in this instance, it's like that took a complete back seat. I didn't feel anything, like, emotionally for that, I guess the best story to watch is Jada Martell and Rachel Zegler's kind of love story. That's definitely, like, the most consistent, like, plot line in this that I was, like, engaged and hooked onto and wanted to see how it worked out. But there is a point in the second act low point, and because the movie is short and it's paced fairly well, I didn't even really tell that it was a second act low point until they started doing it, and I was like, this almost kind of feels like this is coming out of nowhere too. Like, I'm not sure exactly what has, like, stirred this, like, high emotion coming from one of the characters to be this upset, and I don't know. And then they establish that second act low point, but then they resolve it, like, about a minute later, so it's like, it's barely even a thing. They have these characters called the Collective that, you have some good, like, Kyle Mooney's with them, Mason Gooding is a part of them, but they're kind of barely in it. Not that that is a problem if they're just in one scene, but they also show up later, and there's a part of you that's like, hey, why didn't they go with them originally? why are they only just now here? How did this happen? What's the flow here? Another thing I wanted to mention as far as, like, writing your characters and placing them places. Parents. They give parents to Julian Dennison and Jada Martell. You could cut both of them. This is a story that doesn't necessarily require parents, if I'm going to be honest with you. And especially in the case of Jada Martell, is because you have Alicia Silverstone as his mom, and a bit of a thankless role for her. Like, she, like, rips a cig, like, real impressively later in the movie. But as far as, like, comedy, that's kind of it. I kind of get, like, she's like a touchstone of the 90s, whatever. The dad is Tim Heidecker, though, who does, like, these corny-ass, they're not, like, dad jokes, they're, like, dad movie character jokes, where it's like, I don't know, we need a placeholder for, like, a funny line, this'll do. Tim Heidecker, if you don't know who he is, he's one of those guys where you might find him funny, you might not. He's very well known for his, like, very absurd, kind of surrealist comedy from, like, Adult Swim. He's a strange comedian in that sense. He's a different kind of breed. I know he's done some other, like, like, podcasts, like, live event stuff where he's a bit more like a traditional comedian, but what he's mostly known for is how crazy he gets. It's why, like, in Us, they probably cast him as that dad in that one, because they have him switch to the alternate persona, the different dead, the duplicate, and he's just doing like these weird ass body movements and faces, and it's like that's why they hired Tim Heidecker. In this movie, it's like they hired him for no reason. He doesn't do any of his usual stuff that he's good at. He could have been swapped out with anybody. Why is he here? But more importantly, the parents don't need to be in this story, but they've inserted him at the beginning and then at the end kind of randomly when it didn't need to be there. It was just, I don't know, like as far as like cutting the fat, you know, that's something that people say as far as like, you know, writing, that's something you can cut and you have a little bit more time not filming them, you can film something else that might be more important to the narrative. Like for instance, there's a character in the beginning that is talked about 2 separate occasions as far as like, man, they really went through some stuff, huh? Like, oh yeah, it's funny how people change or whatever. But like, they're not in the rest of the movie. I guess mini spoilers, this is a character that dies by the end of the first act. And it's like, why they only did that because they have to have a death, and one of the characters might feel a little bit more sad about that than the rest. But I don't know this character. You know, this is not a character that is making an impact on the script, on the movie. And as far as like their impact on the other characters, I'm not feeling it. And it's like, maybe if you wanted that to be like a point of, you know, importance, maybe highlight that a bit more, you know, like take the time to write some new stuff and highlight it. I don't know, it's a weird experience because I think Kyle Mooney wrote a really fantastic script with Brigsby Bear, and then you have Y2K, and I'm not asking for Brigsby Bear again, you know, I don't think it needs to be like overly emotional or anything. I'm fine with just an absurdist, like, you know, random nonsense comedy, you know, with these like sci-fi horror elements. But, you know, it still has to be good. Like, you know, both things can be good. You do need to take time with both things, and I just feel like it almost feels like they went with like an earlier draft when they were still trying to figure out what this could be. And they were just like, fuck it, we got the funding now, why not? I don't know, I just overall felt really disappointed with this movie, despite its great practical effects. You know, some solid like horror action directing from Kyle Mooney in like a smaller stakes format. Some good acting from our main characters. Ultimately, though, I feel like a lot of jokes kind of fell by the wayside, didn't really hit for me. A lot of the narrative just does not mesh together, and this is a movie that would have benefited from a stronger narrative like that. It just did not meet the potential that I saw in this when it was announced that Kyle Mooney was even going to be making this in the first place. I'm going to give Y2K a C. I was genuinely really let down by this movie. And real quick, I do want to clarify a point that I was making earlier with a little bit more spoilers. Now that I've given the grade, you can click off if you've seen the movie or don't care about spoilers. You can watch this part. 3, 2, 1, spoiler time. Julian Dennison was by far, like, as far as like the younger actors, as far as comedy, he was definitely like, he felt it the most. And that makes sense. He's worked with Taika Waititi. He's been on Deadpool too. Like, he's been on the scene for a little bit. So he was like, as far as like comedy, he was just like kind of hitting it one after the other. Eduardo Franco, I think is that actor's name. There's another guy who I recognize in other movies, and he was really killing it with a lot of his comedic lines as well. And also, Kyle Mooney is in the film, not as himself. He plays like this like very high dreadlock having white guy, like who's like just chill with the kids. And those 3, I would say, were definitely like my favorite characters in the film as far as like comedy. So yeah, when I said earlier, it felt like they killed off the best people first and left you with just the leftovers with, you know, kind of paper thin development or not as strong a screen presence, comedic screen presence as these guys. That's what I mean. They kill off Julian Dennison first, and then a couple minutes, not even like a full sequence, it's like a minute after that death, Eduardo Franco goes out in the funniest way possible. I will give them that. It was a really hysterical scene. He tries to do like a skate trick on his roller skates, but he like fucks it up, smacks his head in the back of the concrete, and just starts bleeding out. I laughed, and then I laughed even harder when I realized he's not getting up. They're committing to him being fucking dead. I was crying at that. Kyle Mooney later in the film goes to fight one of the robots and gets his arm cut off, and he's just like, oh shit, that sucked, and then gets decapitated. So fucking funny. Like, that's what I mean. Like, there are points where I was like crying laughing. A point where like Fred Durst appears, not even as a cameo, as a new character. And when he emerges from the shadows with his dyed like goatee, one of the characters is like, wow, you look like shit. And I was fucking crying. It was so goddamn funny. So that's part of what I mean. Like, there are some parts that I was crying that I was laughing so hard. But it goes back to what I was saying. Like, yeah, those characters, though, were my favorites. And they didn't even save them for, like, near the end. And they didn't take the opportunity to use those to, like, you know, give a better spotlight to the other characters and have them really shine. That's definitely the technique I think they were going for, was to, you know, get you to love these guys, but then remove them, and now we have the rest of the characters that you still need to fall in love with. But I just didn't by the end of the day. I don't think they put in the necessary work for it. Jaden Martell, like I said, and Rachel Zegler, you know, were the most consistent storyline, but like I said, the Rush second act low point kind of put a little bit of a wrench in that, and it felt a little off until they just like reversed it anyways, so it was like, okay. So those are my thoughts on Y2K. I am still rooting for Kyle Mooney, though. If he wants to make another movie, I want to see what it is. But I just hope that there's a little bit more thought put into this screenwriting overall, and also that he utilizes his very talented cast a lot more, because he does, but then he misses the mark as well in some instances, and all of these people are so goddamn talented. Jaden Martell, he's not a kid actor anymore, but he's one of our best upcoming younger actors. I mean, Rachel Zegler, who kills it in every movie that she's been in, is still good in this, but it's like, it feels like a bit of a shade of like what she could have been overall. So yeah, those are my thoughts. Just overall disappointing. But if you've seen Y2K, leave your thoughts down in the comments below what you thought of it. And as always, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time.